What's going on, folks? It's Tommy Gann here once again to deliver the greatest news. Oh, the good news, the very good news. The Chicago Bears, your Chicago Bears, the pride and joy of Illinois, have officially hired Benjamin Johnson to be the next head football coach of the franchise. What a day, what a moment. I sat here at this desk saying, I want Ben Johnson. I need Ben Johnson to be my head coach. I don't want Mike McCarthy. I don't want Pete Carroll. I want Ben Johnson. And the Bears came through. The Bears actually came through. And I have two competing things to kind of go with this at this point. Number one, I have to give some people their flowers. I have given a lot of criticism to the upper echelon of Bears management, and they deserve some apology. So, to Ryan Poles, for your personnel decisions, I've had some questions about, but guess what? Clearly, you were able to get an incredible piece of coaching talent to Chicago, convince him that you will work alongside him. You were pragmatic enough to say that we are going to be partners in this. I thank you. I give you credit. To Kevin Warren, I think in past administrations with Ted Phillips, the Bears would not have gone through with this. The Bears would have found a way to mess it up. They would have done business like they did 40 years ago. We would have had another story like what came out in 2022 where Dan Quinn got flown into Chicago for an interview in economy class, back row, middle seat. Instead, you were able to get into the ear of ownership and say, hey, we need to pay a pretty big sum of money, probably somewhere around $13 million a year, $13 to $15 million a year. And guess what? They listened, and you got it done. And finally, to George McCaskey. I have had a lot of, probably more so than Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren, I've had some very unkind words about George. I've said some very mean things. However, credit where credit is due. It feels like he has opened himself up to change a little more than we were expecting he'd be willing to. And you know what? There has been a bit of a vibe shift around the Bears, I probably say since the day after Thanksgiving. The day after Thanksgiving, I think, was the last time we've seen true incompetence from the franchise level of the Bears when they allowed Matt Eberflus to have his press conference and then fired him right afterwards, the day after the disaster in Detroit on Thanksgiving. That was the last time we saw true Bears-style incompetence. But since then, they did fire him, which was a huge step forward for the Bears, a franchise that quite literally had never fired a head coach midseason before in the entire 100-plus year history of the franchise. They go forward. They start this coaching process. I believe they waited a little bit to start it because they knew Ben Johnson was their top target. They didn't go as quickly as the Jets did because the Jets weren't targeting Ben Johnson as much. They go and set up a lot of interviews. I think it was like 17 interviews. And people were very upset about that. They were saying the Bears were too unfocused. The Bears were just overthinking this. They were being weird. But I think what it comes down to is they knew they weren't going to be able to hire Ben Johnson until the Lions were done, and they wanted to keep their options open, as you should, so that if you live in a world where, hey, Ben Johnson decides not to come to Chicago for whatever reason, you have other options. You have turned over every stone. You have taken the opportunity to try to find the next, Mike Tomlin, the type of guy who you didn't expect to be a great head coach because Tomlin was not even a coordinator when he got hired by the Steelers. But you find them, that the diamond in the rough, and they become a star head coach. At the same time, they also looked at, older guys. They requested to talk to Tomlin, which some people in my circle tried to criticize and clown, but I think was just smart business practices. Hey, see what it would take to get him. See if they were willing to trade him. Why not? And then, when the Lions lost to the Commanders on Saturday, the Bears did not hesitate. They did not take their time. They quickly on Sunday set up an interview with Eddie George to fulfill the Rooney Rule requirement. And after that, they were open to be able to make their hiring as head coach. And on Monday, without forcing him to come to Chicago for a final interview, they, hired him. They hired him. They were aggressive. They were smart. They knew they didn't need to go through the whole rigmarole of being in person. They just needed to hire him. They needed to be first. You know, Jeremy Irons, in a movie called Margin Call, and this was about investment banking and stuff like that, but it's a similar principle. He said that there are 3 ways to make money in this business: to cheat, to be smarter, or to be first. And in the NFL, you don't want to cheat. And you might have some pretty smart people in there, but it's easier to be first. And the Bears were first. And they were first in getting the guy who is smartest. I might be kind of buying into the hype a little too much, but reading everything about how this guy operates and what everyone has to say about him, I can't help but be excited for the team that I love. Now, having said all that, I don't want to just win the offseason. You can't just win the offseason again. Once again, just be the off-season champions. Because we've gone through that for 2 straight off-seasons before this. You know, first in 2023, they had the big trade with Carolina. They got DJ Moore. They seemed to win that trade. We'll see in the long term if that's true, but they seemed to win that trade, and they seemed to fleece the Panthers at the time or whatever. In 2024, that trade got even better when they got the number 1 overall pick, and they got Caleb Williams. So they win the offseason 2 years in a row, and now it looks like they might win the offseason for a 3rd year in a row. I mean, if you gave out Super Bowl trophies for winning the offseason, the Bears might be a dynasty at this point. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And it can't be like that anymore. I can't take that anymore because it keeps coming back to bite us in the ass. It is time to not get so hung up on expectation and just win. Just go out there and make it happen. And I can't think of why this won't work. That if there was anyone to figure out why it wouldn't work, it'd be the Chicago Bears. I will admit that as a Bears fan. But, I have hope. I think Bears fans should have hope. And I think that this could be an incredible combination between Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson for years to come. Now, going over a couple of states to Detroit, Lions fans, what are you doing? Well, actually, I know what you're doing. You have not been here before, so you don't know how to act, clearly, because they've been going hard at Ben Johnson. And don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. They have every right to be upset. They have every right to be unhappy. They have every right to be very ill at ease that their golden boy at offensive coordinator is now staying in the division going to the Bears. I'm not saying they don't have a right to be upset. However, to go out there and to throw out things like Benedict Arnold and Osama Ben Johnson, what are we doing here? What are you doing? This is the National Football League. This is how business is done. I'm sorry. This is how business works in this league. You bring in great coordinators knowing if they're great enough, they're going to be hired away. And if they are really great, they're going to have an opportunity to choose between hiring opportunities. And Ben Johnson looked at the market and said the Bears were the best opportunity for him. Simple as that. That's how it goes. And they're also trying to say that, he was already focusing on hiring his coaching staff. He wasn't mentally prepared to coach in that game against the Commanders where they lost. First of all, he's interviewing for these head coaching positions. When you're doing that and there's a quick turnaround, you get hired and you got to hire a staff, you need to have names available or at least ready to go to give about who you might want to bring in. This is not rocket science, and it's not anything, colluding against the Lions or showing his passion to the Lions. It is what it is. And then they put up 31 points and 500 yards. I mean, if you're going to blame somebody, blame Jared Goff for the turnovers. Okay? Blame the defense, which was very injured, to be fair, for letting the Commanders run all over them. 31 points, 500 yards. Give me a break. They get upset about a trick play call, and it's like 31 points. Come on. Give me a break. His offense was still electric on Saturday, and you pretend like they completely, crapped an egg. Give me a break. That's not the case. Now, I have learned, and from research, that the Lions have not had an offensive coordinator, any type of coordinator, offensive or defensive, be hired away by another team to be their head coach since the Kennedy administration. And that coordinator was Don Shula, the future Hall of Fame head coach for the Dolphins. I mean, come on. It's a long time ago. So, and as a Bears fan, I mean, for as bad as the Bears have been, I have seen there have been 3 different Bears coordinators who have gotten hired away to be head coaches for other teams. So, I've seen it happen. So, if they want to be upset, that's fine. But to go after Ben Johnson in this way, I think is just ridiculous. It's low class. Just calm down a little bit. Just calm down. He had a chance to leave last year, and he said, no, I want to stick around. That's a loyal guy right there. He wanted to stick around even though he had a chance to leave. So, calm down. I know, Detroit, you feel like everyone good abandons you, but trust me when I say this. This is simply life in the National Football League. I'm very sorry. Now, talk about other coaching situations going on right now. I know the Saints are going to be interviewing Mike McCarthy. The Jets have already hired Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator for the Lions, to be their head coach. And the Raiders are still looking. Right now, there are 2 teams that looks like they've found their guy, from what I've heard. I don't think anything's been made official. The Jags and the Cowboys. For the Cowboys, Barstool Big Cat has said that incompetent franchises do incompetent things. One of the things he likes to say. And when you look at how the Dallas Cowboys have operated since the end of the season, you can't imagine that it isn't the case for them. That doesn't perfectly describe their situation. Because what are you doing? If you are a team that does not make the playoffs, you have 2 choices with your head coach if you want to be in the best possible position going into the next season. Number 1, you have the future of your current head coach figured out. You have a contract signed, or you are deep in negotiations and you plan on signing the contract. Or 2, you fire the head coach at the very latest, right after that first game, maybe the day after that last game, and you move on and you get a jump start. You're right there with the other teams that need head coaches trying to find your next head coach. The Cowboys waited 8 days from the end of their season to say we are moving on from Mike McCarthy and trying to find a new head coach. 8 days. They knew that his contract was coming up midway through January. So what do? They wait on it. Now, my theory on this is this. We know how Jerry Jones likes to drag out these negotiations and drag them out to the last minute, basically. And he was planning on dragging out this Mike McCarthy situation to the last minute as well, because he expected that Mike McCarthy wasn't really going to have much leverage. There wasn't much else to look for. No other places that would want him. And then the Chicago Bears put in an interview request for him. They asked the Cowboys, hey, can we talk to Mike McCarthy? And that immediately gave him leverage. And once he got the leverage, he wanted more money than Jerry wanted to give over to him, and they just decided to let him go. I mean, incompetence doesn't even begin to describe it. And it looks like they're going to hire Brian Schottenheimer, their OC, which is not a terrible hire or anything. I thought they were going to go with Kellen Moore, but Schottenheimer's not a bad hire. However, you could have had your shot at Ben Johnson. You could have had your shot at some of these other top-tier candidates that other teams are looking at. Instead, you decide to do business the wrong way, and it bites you in the ass. At least that's the way I see it. Then, you go over to the Jaguars. The Jaguars looks like they're going to hire Liam Cohen after all. For a while there, it looks like he was going to just stay in Tampa, and now it looks like he's going to be the head coach for the Jaguars. But they would have avoided the situation and maybe even had a better shot at getting Ben Johnson if they would have done the obvious thing, firing Trent Baalke as their GM. It wasn't that hard to do. And everyone around the league said it was time to move on. You were moving on from Doug Peterson, which even Doug Peterson knew they were going to do. Everyone knew it. It was time to move on from Baalke. Instead, they're like, nah, we're keeping him around. Nah, we know better than you somehow. We know better than everyone else in the league. We're keeping him around. And that definitely spoiled any chance of them getting Ben Johnson. And then, that for a while there, it looks like it was going to spoil Liam Cohen. The moment that Liam Cohen said, nah, I don't want to deal with this toxic situation where you're going to keep around this GM that seems like a lame duck, finally, the Jags said, this is untenable. We got to move on. And once they said that, then they came back to Liam Cohen and said, okay, please come here. We're going to bring in a new GM that's going to fit with you, and we're going to go from there. So they avoided disaster. However, it just seems like they are going down a path of incompetence following the footsteps of Jerry Jones. That seems like how Shad Khan is going about this operation. It's not good. If I were a Jags Cowboys fan, I would not be super excited about the future, if only because of how bad these coaching searches have shown up so far. I'm just saying. Then, talking about football games that actually are about to happen, the AFC and NFC championships. We'll start with the NFC. Eagles, Commanders in Philly. Eagles are favored by 6. I don't think we have really seen something quite like what Jaden Daniels has done with Washington this season. I really don't. It has been remarkable. Truly remarkable. And then you go into the playoffs and to win 2 games in a row, including beating the number 1 seed, the heavy favorites, the Detroit Lions. It's pretty dang impressive. This is one of the best rookie stories we've ever seen in NFL history. It feels unprecedented. And I know the Eagles are favored here by almost a touchdown. And I understand the obvious choice feels like going with the Eagles. However, with the kind of dominant fashion in which they beat up on the Lions, I really am bullish on this Commanders team. I really am. And I really like Washington to win this game and to cover the +6. I know it's crazy. I know that this Eagles team has been here before. I understand all that. However, sometimes you can feel that momentum coming. That train roaring down the tracks. And it feels like the Commander train is rushing through. Give me the Commies +6 and to win the NFC. Next, Bills at Chiefs. Chiefs favored by 1.5. Now stop me if you have heard this before, but the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills are going to be meeting each other in the AFC Championship game. Chiefs favored by 1.5 in Arrowhead. At this point, this reminds me of the old Brooklyn Dodgers, New York Yankees World Series matchups where they played each other a billion times, and a billion times the Yankees won. over and over and over again. If there is a Yankees of the 2020s in professional football, you'd say it's the Chiefs. On the precipice of a true dynasty, or probably maybe even already a true dynasty. However, eventually the Dodgers came through and won. Eventually it happened. It took a while, but it happened. And I've got a feeling that is that moment for the Buffalo Bills. Listen, Josh Allen this year, I believe, deserves the MVP for the fact that he lost his weapons, and yet the team seemed to get better in certain aspects. I love the Bills in this game to finally make it happen. There's a reason why only one team, one quarterback, has defeated Patrick Mahomes this season, and that team was the Buffalo Bills. Give me the Buffalo Bills, plus 1.5. Buffalo Bills to win in Arrowhead, and give me a Buffalo-Washington Super Bowl, a rematch of Super Bowl 26. I'm going double upsets this weekend, folks. I'm going double upsets. Hoo-ah. Thank you, folks, for watching. Please subscribe, like, go to my social medias at Tommy SGAHAN. Tommy SGAHAN. Gahan. I'm Tommy Gahan, and this has been Tommy Talk. See you guys.